choose one thing and just stick with it for a month or two. And then from there, switch to something else. And then from there, switch to something else. Commit to a few specific things that a student or a kid wants to do in a year and just help them walk through all of those. Let's say your kids start doing electronics for the first 2 months of this year. So you switch into photography, they do that for another 2 months, something else for another 2 months. If they really enjoyed electronics, you'll find them wanting to go back to that. And that's really where if you can help guide kids in a bit of a better path to say, you see, you always come back to this. Let's start building off of that.
Welcome to Pebbles of Light, where we highlight the everyday people who bring hope, comfort, and light to others. I'm your host, Maxson, sharing meaningful stories to help you find light in your journey. If the messages shared resonate with you, please follow, share, or support the podcast through Patreon to help keep the mic on and spread the light even farther. Oliver, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. We have known each other for about 6 months, just kind of through the startup community here in Boise. And it wasn't until kind of October or November where we got to sit down at a luncheon and we got to just kind of chat. And the more I got to know about you and your background and experiences, I was like, I want to know more. And so then when I was reviewing the podcast, you were one of the first people on my mind, which was great because you reached out and said, hey, I want to learn more about what you're doing with the podcast. So let's start with just kind of a quick background on you, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper as we go along.
Sounds good. Yeah. So you talked about this a bit at that luncheon. I was initially an arts kid in high school. I really love taking things apart, but I also really love the creative aspect. So I wanted to go into engineering. I knew that's what I wanted to do in college, but I took a lot of time to just learn the creative side, learn sculptural work, learn different types of mediums, leatherworking, painting, drawing, photography, which became a big part of my life afterwards. And then from there, I eventually moved into my bachelor's in general engineering, but emphasizing robotics and systems engineering, which is where I really got to bring together my artistic and my engineering side, as that really was systems engineering. It was looking at a problem that someone had and figuring out how do I build something that's useful to them, that is also usable by them in a way that makes sense to them, and make it look good as well, and make it look like a product they want to use.
Yeah, so making art functional and beautiful and helpful. I love it.
Exactly.
It's such a cool idea. So like back when you kind of first started, when you were really, really young, what were you drawn to? Not necessarily like what did you want to be when you grew up, but more like what kind of called to you?
It was really just understanding how things worked was a big thing that drew me in, especially to art at the time, actually, because I saw different art pieces through my art classes, and I was always intrigued, especially the kinetic sculptures, the ones that you see actually moving in a museum, understanding how did they work, why did they work, what did the artist have to do to make something like that happen, as well as the larger sculptures of just how did they stand without falling, how did such fragile pieces not break when people were walking by them. And it was just that concept of how things work that really drove me to keep exploring. And I always enjoyed to explore regardless. I'm actually the son of two immigrants. So I traveled a lot growing up to go see family. We traveled to see a lot of the world. So there was a lot of just exploring that I was fortunate enough to do while growing up. And that really drove my curiosity, my want to learn more.
Yeah, and just kind of art is so different from one culture to another. And also, like you went to an IB school, so International Baccalaureate. Did that feed into it as well as maybe if you want to explain a little bit about what International Baccalaureate means for those who don't know?
Yeah, so the IB or International Baccalaureate program is an international program that started off, I believe, in Europe and is a more intense, for lack of better words, program for everyone from elementary through high school. So at the school, K through 12, you're learning both English, and the one I went to was French, was the second language choice until 10th grade, you could switch to Spanish. But for the time I was there, I learned French. And then you got put into these different classes to do higher level work with the ultimate goal of getting a year off of your degree in terms of the credits you get from what's called the IB exams at the end of 12th grade. So through that, that was probably one of the biggest drivers for why I've been able to learn as much as I did today. I actually graduated early from IB. Boise State wouldn't take my credits. So I was like, okay, well, I guess they would take my credits, but they wanted like double the global standards for scores. And I was like, that's not worth my sanity. So
Yeah,
I ended
exactly.
up leaving a bit early. But the art students I knew who were doing the what we call DP or diploma program, those getting ready for college, as you have the option for college or to go directly into a trade and get schooling for both. They effectively did a 4-year art degree in 2 years. They went through, they built, I believe it was anywhere between 12 and 20 custom curated art pieces. And then those got put on display at the end of their 12th grade year. And they spent every year up until 12th grade, when you start that process, teaching students how to work through their progress portfolios. We had books full of just analyzing different artists, recreating different pieces, different techniques, different strategies, and had all that stored with us and work through it. So that by the time we got to that point, we knew what type of art we liked, what we wanted to explore, how different techniques worked, and how to mix and merge those into what we had in our head. And that's really what helped me become a successful engineer. Was I had the ability to think, I know these few fundamental concepts, but what if I mix them together? If I know this works in one way and something works in another, then they should have this type of interaction. And that was a lot of things I noticed as I went through my engineering degree, not many students had. They spent textbook after textbook answering questions, but there was no time for really understanding how does everything integrate afterwards.
Yeah, that makes sense. So my son goes to an IB school and we went to a band concert or something and it was phenomenal. They said, we're going to listen to a piece that was composed by the senior as part of
Mhm,
their, senior capstone type of program. And they'll be the conductor for this piece as well.
mhm.
And I was just like, wow, like that's just a phenomenal amount of training and knowledge that's required in order to do all of those different things for high school students. What are your thoughts, though, as far as like specificity is great?
Mhm.
You can start getting really, especially these days, I feel like even middle school electives, you can start getting
Yeah.
really, really specific in what you want to do. And it provides some clarity and in some ways efficiency as far as like hammering out some credits before you even get to college. But do you think that that can sometimes narrow students down a little bit or have them miss out on some of those opportunities? Like you said, having that kind of expanded knowledge base that you had actually was beneficial, even though you didn't take, well, maybe you did, but maybe you didn't take a bazillion engineering classes all through middle school and high school.
Yeah, I took two engineering classes. We didn't have engineering at my high school. We had what was called design technology. So I got to assemble a few circuits in that, but the bulk of what we did was like we built a wall. Like all the students were required to learn how to frame a wall, and then we framed the wall each. There was a go-kart club or solar go-kart club that I did, but it was more like hands-on manufacturing than anything else. But yeah, there is a lot you can specialize in, and it's only getting more intense as the years go on, where it's like now you have 40 different options, and it's you've got one teacher teaching 20 different things, which I love the ability for students to really find something they love and dive into it. But at the same time, I wish there was more broadening of skills for students before they hit college. Even the students I teach, I'm young, I'm the age of most of the students I teach right now, and they will come to me asking me like, "Hey, I want to learn these things. I want to learn these different things." And I'll have them go through the different paths, but they'll say, "I just don't know what I want to do when I grow up." And I'm like, "That's fine. You are early 20s, you typically shouldn't know what you want to do at this rate. You've barely made it through one degree. You've gone through high school. You've gone through a set curriculum that the state and the federal government want you to go through, so you learn the basics, but you haven't explored. You haven't seen things. You haven't tried out internships. You haven't tried out jobs. It's not something we have such an expectation for people to be ready and to be full adults by 18 without giving them the opportunity to really explore what life is and really what the options they have are. Because there's a lot of people I know who are like, oh, I want to do theater or music and these different things. And then they go in, they try the field, they commit 6+ years of their lives to it, only to find out they didn't like it because they didn't have
Yeah.
the opportunity to try it.
Yeah, exactly. I think you and I have talked about this. I started two PhD programs before finally going to pharmacy school. And I mean, I don't technically work as a pharmacist, really. I do some consulting and then I have a startup. But I think sometimes finding out what you don't want to do is just as important as finding out what you do want to do. So for those students who are kind of feeling that pull of multiplicity, but not knowing what to do with their schedule and how to fit things in, what advice would you have for them as well as for parents of those students who want to help those students navigate those opportunities?
I think And it really depends on age. The earlier the better, really. But choose one thing and just stick with it for a month or two. And then from there, switch to something else. And then from there, switch to something else. Commit to a few specific things that a student or a kid wants to do in a year and just help them walk through all of those. If there's something that they really enjoyed in those, maybe let's say you started this now, your kids started doing electronics for the first 2 months of this year, and they did it up through the start of March. Let's say you switch them to something else. You switch them to photography. They do that for another 2 months, something else for another 2 months. If they really enjoyed electronics, you'll find them wanting to go back to that. You'll find them wanting to find more interesting parts. It won't be a matter of they were really interested at the time, but they didn't lose interest because it was always there. It'll be a matter of well, they were really interested because it was always on their mind. They were always thinking about it, how they could change things. And that's really where, if you can find those little parts, you can help guide kids in a bit of a better path to say, you see, you always come back to this. Let's start building off of that. And then from there, expanding, saying, okay, if you like this thing, here's a few adjacent fields. Let's try those out alongside this one.
Yeah, very cool. We actually, I mean, that made me think of something. I have a son who was in band last year, but the school that he's at no longer has a band program. And he asked for a trumpet for Christmas. And we were kind of like, there's not a band. But, but we're like, well, we'll get him a trumpet. So we got him a trumpet, and he just like, he'll like, I'm gonna go practice. So he'll just go and practice. And what you said helps me recognize, oh, like even though there's not band, he wanted a trumpet. Even after we got it for him, like he just goes and he practices on his own, which is much better than when I tried to get them to take piano lessons. Just gonna say. But it was insightful to think about that and just kind of what we've seen recently in our house. Speaking of Boise State, they did eventually accept some of your credits and wanted to apologize for not accepting them, so they had you be the commencement speaker shortly.
Oh, the commencement speak. Yeah, so I got no credits for my degree, but because I started early, I still graduated earlier than all of my friends who had
Nice.
graduated the year after. But with that, yes, I was the commencement speaker for the fall of 2024. Sort of applied as a joke. Thing came across my email. I'm like, you know what? Fine. I'm not going to accept it. I will throw an application in. I will go. I was friends with the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs. I was like, or not even at the time, he wasn't actually. He was just the department chair of the mechanical engineering department. And I wrote him and I'm like, hey, Todd, can you write me this letter of rec for this thing? He's like, sure, why not? So I got that. I submitted some essay on like the importance of failure and then didn't think about it again until it was in my inbox 2 months later. And they were like, yeah, you got accepted. You're doing this. And I'm like, oh, no.
Hang on a second. Gotta think about this. So that's really interesting. So the previous episode of the podcast was a solo episode that I did talking about overcoming feelings of failure. And so when I was stalking you a little bit prior to this, I have a quote from your commencement address where you said, look at how far you've made it. Embrace the tragedy of a good life. And when you fall, and you will, know that this too is a gift. So I want to know kind of what led to those words, and kind of looking back, what experiences taught you that there are trials and uncertainties that can deepen rather than diminish your life? And
E-
how did that lead to success and change your view of what success really meant?
Yeah, so there's two parts for that. The core really of the entire talk is my background as a rock climber. So growing up a just in the topic of just jumping into random things, I jumped into climbing one summer. I think I tried 7 or 8 sports growing up between middle and high school. I was all over the place, but I really loved climbing. And climbing is one of those sports where you learn to fail or you leave the sport because you can spend, and I've done this, I've spent 2 hours a day on a single climb for 3 weeks only to not finish the climb and then have it pulled off of the wall at the gym the next week. So, and it's something you have to learn to understand. The point of doing the climb over and over is not for you to finish the climb. It's for you to grow your strength. It's for you to grow your technical ability. And it's for you to learn what to do if something like that comes up again. A lot of climbing is learning how to take the small pieces from falling off the wall and then adapt with that to grow the next time you try that climb or another climb. A lot of times you'll find me at the climbing gym when I go, try and climb after climb, and you'll just see me fall over and over and over, but I'm having fun. I'm enjoying the process. I'm enjoying learning because I'm pulling different things from each climb. And that's really where the root of that speech came from. And then at the same time, it actually initially, the speech was developed in one of my capstone classes for the honors college. And we had to come up with a speech to give. And luckily, it was around the same time I had to submit everything for commencement. So I'm like, I already have something. Why not?
Exactly.
But a poem I had heard of a while ago, which I recited during the commencement speech about Icarus, I had come back up on, I think it was TikTok. It was either that or Instagram. And it really captivated me when I was looking at what I want to do for this talk and thinking about my experience with climbing, with engineering, especially in the field where my co-founder and I actually co-taught a intro to electronics course in one of the engineering classes, and he would always start off the class by blowing something up. He would take a small 2-3 cent component, run too much voltage through it. We effectively actually just plugged a tiny little component the size of like your thumb into the wall and
Huh.
then just let it blow up in smoke and flame for the sole purpose of telling students like, hey, this blew up. This cost a penny. It is okay if this thing blows up. It is natural engineering. We joke in engineering that nothing is ever right the first time. You have to go through it once to figure out how things work, and then from there you can do the full implementation. So it's a lot of just through engineering, through climbing, through just different life experiences, you have to figure out how you can pull knowledge from everything. Because ultimately, if you do everything right all the time, are you really learning? Are you really growing, experiencing, or are you just sort of repeating what you know works out of not wanting to explore more? Which can be fine for some people. But I find oftentimes the folks I know live the fullest lives and the funnest lives are the ones who are willing to take that risk. And at the end of the day, if something didn't go the way they want, say, well, I learned something, and then keep moving.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something I've learned a lot in business, right? Is that
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be perfect. You just see what resonates with people and figure things out as you go along. And like, yeah, having faith in the effort, not in the outcome, right? Like
Hmm.
thinking about those little steps and those things that you learn with each kind of failed attempt, be like, okay, well, now I know not to do that anymore, right? Like
Yep.
you're able to kind of work through different things with that. So, what is something that you've tried where it was completely out of your comfort zone? Because you've done like stalking you on Instagram, my goodness. Like you like obviously you're a business owner and startup entrepreneur, all sorts of different types of art which you talked about. Tons of traveling, really amazing photography going around on these different
Thank you.
photography things. Carpentry, like woodworking sides of things, teaching classes, like what is something where you were like, whoa, this is way, way out of my comfort zone. And I'm going to really have to lean into that idea of when all the work doesn't mean it works, right?
Hmm.
So just kind of waiting for it to work.
Ironically enough, I think that the best example is my current PhD, where this last year I've submitted and been rejected for 2 papers
Oh man.
because it is an entirely new field for me. I went from doing robotics, embedded system code, which are really just making smaller things actually move, and that type of work to it's a PhD that's half in psychology, understanding how people process images on a screen to then turn that into mathematical models and genetically or in some algorithmic way optimize an interface for critical infrastructure, be it a cybersecurity interface, be it a nuclear reactor, pretty much take the human brain and turn it into math and then apply that to an image. So it takes a lot of parts that I have some information of and some knowledge of, but then it throws in like psychology, which I have done a single class in my entire life. It throws in stuff like UI UX, which I learned a bit through being a consultant and through art, but never did on a website style side to or like a web app style side for this. And then the mathematical part, where yes, I have a degree in robotics. I can do math somewhat. My co-founder will joke about my inability to do math, which is not sometimes. But at the same time, I've never had to build actual models of this complexity before, where I'm referencing psychological papers, proposing theories about human behavior, and I'm now having to understand how do I take a theory of, for example, I feel like I'm going to butcher this. I want to say it's Fitts law, where a human can hold plus or minus 7 concepts in their head at a time. So you can, it's the initial thing was actually this might be Hicks. It's one of the two. There's many
One of those
psychologists
guys.
there. Yeah, it's think of like holding seven balls in your hands. Maybe you have five, maybe you have nine. That is what they're trying to explain, like you can consciously process at once. There's a lot of nuance there. This is a very old law that came out, I want to say 1989. But yeah, taking something like that and saying, okay, but how is that made into math? How do you penalize something beyond nine, something below six? What does that penalization actually mean relative to everything else being calculated? So it's that one's been an interesting process because it's just a lot of writing papers, submitting, getting rejected, trying again, taking feedback, going for it. So here's to hoping I get the
I
papers
know.
accepted this year.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome though. Like, that's a really interesting concept. In my mind, like the way I thought of it was like, how many tabs can you have open at a time?
Yeah,
Like, okay. So getting back to kind of the cultural side of things, I shared a quote when I had sent you kind of these thoughts, but there's a book that my son and I just read called Resistance, and it is about teenage couriers during World War II going into the ghettos in Poland. And it's specific, the majority of the book is about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And there's a spot where a character first kind of arrives in the ghetto and she hears someone playing the violin. And she's kind of like, wait, like this is a horrible situation. Why is there someone playing a violin? And so she asks another character who's been in the ghetto for a while what their thoughts are on it. And that character said, they herd us into train cars like cattle, give our rabbis and scholars the work of oxen, feed us less than what is given to their dogs, and they kill us with no more regard than they give to slaughtering a farm animal. But there is something a human can do that an animal never can: create art. It's proof of humanity. It allows me, just for the length of that song, to remember who I really am, no matter what surrounds me. So, for you, what has that creating art brought to you to help you recognize the importance of humanity and as an outlet for your humanness, I guess?
yeah, it's especially through my photography because it's my main fields really are photography and sculptural work. And a lot of what is seen in my photography as I've gone out to different booths and I've had some photos exhibited abroad is you'll notice a lot of my pieces focus on small things. They'll focus on tiny little berries in the bush. They'll focus on a single leaf that might be a little different than the other. I have photos of just like a crimpled up flower that had just died, but it's all framed in bright lights more often than not. I look a lot at color and at beauty, regardless of the situation, of the little things that most people don't tend to see when they're walking by different areas. And I have some other larger pieces that are looking at landscapes that typically tend to be more colorful or animals of them like smiling or just having a good time. And some black and whites, which I also love. But even in those, there's a lot of just, I focus on heavy contrast and a lot of, even without color, seeing the intensity in different points because that's where I tend to see most people have an interesting reaction to the photos. It's where they're so used to the same type of photo over and over that then you put a pair of, I think I've got a photo of poison ivy berries in front of them, and they stop for a moment because they're like, wait, what is this? It's not an abstract photo. I'm not framing something as something else. It's just what it is. But it's such an unfamiliar object that most people haven't seen it. So it causes people to stop and think and ask questions and have conversation, which is a lot of the point of my works is just to have a conversation. A lot of people look at art, go through, and they're like, oh, this is interesting, and then they keep moving. A lot of my goals are to get people to actually talk to others and get people to have either internal or external dialogue about what they're looking at or why or what makes them feel and that type of work. Because it's a lot of what I see in many other cultures that seems so fascinating about human nature is really our ability to pull so much from so little.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm working on saying but an interview with a good friend of mine who is a photographer and then he's also a cinematographer. And so he's helped with a few different movies and music videos and stuff like that. But last year he was able to go to all seven continents and he's done a lot of photography work and stuff in Iceland. And so he's just got these amazing photos and stuff. And he has kind of a similar concept of, I was like, how do you see beauty in things that most people just walk by and don't even notice? And so I love that you use that as a way to help people draw their eye to those things and their attention. Speaking about like just kind of cultures, and you mentioned your parents are immigrants. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like growing up in a family with immigrants? And it's two different countries, right?
Yes. Yeah. So my dad is from Canada and my mom is from Mexico, which made a very interesting dynamic, especially being from two very different areas. Says my dad is, well, I say Canada, he's from an island called Newfoundland, which we really have our own very chaotic culture on that island. There's a lot of history behind it.
I was Is Newfoundland the one where it's a weird time zone? It's a half hour?
Yes, Newfoundland, we
Okay.
have a half hour. We're one of, I want to say, only two or three spots in the world with a half hour change in time zone. So anytime I'm trying to call home, I want to say it's 2.5 hour difference between Boise and Newfoundland, which makes things interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, but yeah, so it was a mix of that, and then my mom's family from Mexico, where we have deeper roots than I thought, to the point of I technically actually in both ends. I apparently am Native American, not in the sense of like Native American as you hear folks here in the US, like Canadian, Old Scottish Native American, and then more like not the Aztecs, but similar tribal on the Mexican side. So there was just a lot of rich culture between the two. Then you add in having to travel to go see family in both ends. There is no family nearby. I have my dad here in town, and my closest family member is 13 hours north in Canada. So there's a lot of having to move around to go see people in different areas and really just having to, there is that natural need to explore, to go see family. You have to go travel to them. You have to go learn new areas, learn the cultures. But then, especially on my mom's side, everyone on my dad speaks English, but the majority of the folks on my mom's side speak Spanish. And typically, for obvious reasons, they are more comfortable in Spanish than not. So it's actually my mother tongue because it allowed me to communicate with them sooner, where English was going to be taught to me anyways. So I ended up learning both at the same time. But
Very cool.
there's two interesting points to that, especially as I've gone through more language classes and worked with other folks who grew up in the US to US families. It's very interesting to see when you're trying to translate a language where there's many words in Spanish that don't translate to English. They're a feeling, they're a history, they're a culture, they're a context that just doesn't exist in the English language, which makes it interesting to try and translate some things back and forth too. And I actually think I put a post on this on LinkedIn, is why I think LLMs really won't go as far as people think. Because yeah, for English, for technical stuff, they do great for that because that's very clearly defined. But as you get into poetry and into different languages, having to translate back and forth as you hit more and more of those difficult to translate words, that doesn't happen when you're missing everything behind the linguistic language. You're missing the physical reactions, the mental reactions, the cultural context. None of that's present when you're using an LLM like that. And it really makes you think, even just as a kid, as you're learning different words and having to translate back and forth, what does that mean for me? Does this word really mean what I want it to, or is there something else there? So it's a very interesting dynamic on that sense. And then the other side is when you speak multiple languages, you learn to think in that language as well. So when I speak in Spanish, I don't think in English and then translate, or vice versa, since Spanish is my first language, but I think in Spanish or I think in English. If I'm talking English, I'm thinking English. If I'm talking Spanish, I'm thinking in Spanish. There is no split. Even as I've learned other languages, French was the third one I learned, I think in French and then I speak in French. There is no need to translate and go back and forth. Your brain shifts to that language. And that's one of the hardest things I've had to explain to some of my friends as we've gone through language courses together, is that shift of, you don't just have to have one language and then translate to learn other languages. The goal is to shift your mindset and really think in that language, understand what those feelings and emotions are for yourself for the different words and context, so it just comes naturally rather than Well, I know this word translates to that. So if I want to say this, I want to say that, and then you speak, and then you have to reverse translate and go back.
Yeah, I served a Spanish speaking mission for 18
Nice.
months. And after I gotten home, my dad had given me some instructions for something to read, and he thought they were just in Spanish. So he's like, read these in Spanish and tell me what they mean. I'm reading them, and then I keep reading. I was like, it's repeating the same thing. Why is it saying the same thing twice? I was like, oh, it's in English the second time, but in my brain, I was just
Hmm.
translating to Spanish.
Yeah.
I love what you said too about how you can learn so much from the way different languages say something. One of my favorite Spanish phrases is dar luz. So it's used in regard to giving birth, right? But it technically means to give light. And I don't know, it adds a richness to etymology of words when you're able to kind of see that perspective on things.
Yeah, and it changes your vocabulary a lot because when you add in especially a lot of flavor from these different languages that have been around a lot longer than English, you start to change how you speak and where you put emphasis in words. And like you said, using something like that loose, you start to rethink what sort of words you want to use, which makes especially poetry from folks who are bilingual, trilingual, so fascinating because you're not just considering what they wrote in English, but where that might have come from their native language.
Yeah, exactly. Very cool. Is there anything you want to share about QTechs? Like, so we can wrap up, and then there's one final question. But
I mean, it's sort of been the culmination of a lot of what I've done in my life. My co-founder, Chris, he came to me after an 800+ mile biking trip, being like, hey, there's this problem that we've all run into as electrical engineers. Trying to design a new electronic product is a pain. And designing anything electronic, there's so much documentation and data that you have to read to know what to build, that it's just a known struggle. And we all just have collectively agreed, I guess we'll deal with it and budget for it. Oh, through one of the classes that I actually now teach, Chris came to me working on this power board for a robot that we were building, and he was like, "Hey, this is done," because I had asked him to build it for the class. But I want to build this software to make this easier because it shouldn't have been this difficult to find the parts I needed. And from that, we started the company. And ironically enough, while my degree is in engineering and I love to do that sort of work and design, I do our marketing and our operations because a lot of what I learned, not through university, but through the projects I ran, was how to organize, how to operate, how to run my financials, how to analyze my budgets, and all that fun jazz. So I don't do as much engineering now, but it's still fun to be a part of it because it's our goal is really to build a tool that not just helps change how the engineering workflow works, but also build a tool that we can use. Even if we sell the company or it grows to massive heights and new people come into power, whatever happens, wherever we go, ultimately it's a tool we want to use for as long as we can design. And it's been fun getting to actually meet with other engineers, meet with other companies, and get to learn what they're building. It's probably my funnest part about sales and marketing is getting to meet all these different companies, jump on calls, jump on demos, and ask people like, "What are you building?" And then be able to sit down with them and be like, "Ooh, okay, why are you building it with this design? What about these concepts?" And go back and forth with them and have those fun conversations and see the passion in so many of the new startups trying to build hardware in such a capital intensive space with almost no funding, which makes me feel so bad for them. It makes me feel very glad I'm in the software space. But it's great being able to spot where we can build a tool to support those companies and then get to see them grow and grow with.
yeah, it's true. And I love the Boise startup community. Like, it's a special place. There's so many people here, and everybody's just kind of cheering each other on, trying to
Hmm.
help each other, whether that's networking and connecting people with people or just all sorts of different events and things like that. It's a really cool place to be with a startup.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, final question. One purpose of Pebbles of Light is to honor the relationships that quietly brighten our path and help us find our way. So you've shared a lot of different ways that you've been able to light the path through others through art and through supporting others and business adventures and things like that. But could you share about one or two people who've placed a pebble of light in your path when you needed it most and how that helped change your path?
I think I'm probably actually going to have to go with Chris for this one because I wouldn't be here at this company on this podcast if it wasn't for him asking me about that business idea. Because we've known each other for over 4 years now. We met my third semester at Boise State. I walked into the wrong building, had to run to the right one for a physics lab, and the only seat left open was next to him. And then he showed up to the mechanical engineering club I was the vice president for at the time. Later, I don't remember if it was that day or later that week. And then since then, we have effectively been conjoined at the hip. And he
Yeah,
has been my best friend in building all of this. And we've got such an amazing crew around us at Boise State and jokes now where all the faculty who know us, if you ask them where one of us is, they'll say, go find the other. So
nice.
yeah, but it's getting to know him and getting to build with him has really been through multiple projects, been why I'm here now with this company, building it alongside him and getting to have all these opportunities.
So feel like that happens a lot where you just kind of a random circumstance, you end up randomly next to somebody in a class. And
Mhm.
I mean, I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in the lives of my kids where that's who they were meant to meet that day.
Yep.
Very cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining the
Thank you.
podcast today. Really appreciated the time and thanks for your insights about all things creativity, really.
Thank you again for having me. It was a ton of fun, and I look forward to hearing this one and all of the other episodes that you put out.
I hope you appreciated that conversation that we had with Oliver. I really appreciate the insights I was able to share from all these different areas of interest that he has. And so before you go, here's this episode's Pebble. Choose one interest that you've been curious about and explore it for the next 30 days without needing to succeed. Let curiosity guide you and notice what you learn along the way. And if this episode resonated with you, please follow, subscribe, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and leave a review. Your support really helps these stories of light reach others. Thank you for tuning in. My hope is that something helped you feel seen, encouraged, or inspired to bring light to someone else. If a name or moment stood out, don't let it pass. Reach out, express gratitude, or take that next step. You can connect with me anytime on socials at Pebbles of Light or at Maxson.com. If this episode was meaningful for you, please follow the show, rate or review, and share it with someone who might need a lift today. And if you want to go a step farther, you can support the show on Patreon. See you next time.